The reason we're doing it today is because today is St Andrew's Day, and I thought, well, who better to fulfil that religious connotation than Andrew Bishop? So here with Andy Bishop, and I have to tell you, my little grandson from the Legends match, he still goes about to this day, and he sings the Andy Bishop song. The do. Andy Bishop. He still does it. He still does it, even though he hasn't been replacing since that day. He still does it. But
I have to sing it to my son now when he plays.
So you're a Midlands lad. You're from Cannock in Staffordshire. Started your career at Walsall. Had a couple of loan spells out at Kidderminster and Yeovil, and that lot up the road we won't mention. We'll ignore that part of the history. And then you got to move to York, where you really came to sort of prominence. Ended up being top scorer in the conference for York with 22 goals in a season, I think, before you came to Bury. 22 goals, that right?
Something like that.
So you actually signed for us on a free transfer, which I think is a remarkable thing to say, that we actually got the top scorer in the conference for nothing. How did that come about?
It was in my contract when I left Walsall. I had the choice to stay at Walsall. I'd been offered a new contract, but I wanted first team football. And I'd spoke to Chris Brass and sort of said, I'm dropping down a few leagues. I want to prove myself. I'm happy to sign the 2-year deal, but I'd like a clause in my contract saying, because I were under 23, I'd like to be able to leave for free if my contract runs down. Luckily enough, they agreed to it. So as soon as my contract were running down, I was lucky enough to be able to go on a free.
I mean, that's an absolute bargain from a Bury perspective. Like I say, getting the conference's top goal scorer. And then in your first season at Gig Lane, you hit 21 goals, and that was the first time in 13 years that a Bury player had managed to score 20 plus goals in a season. So how successful do you think that first season was?
It was a difficult season, a very difficult season. Personally, it were great for me, but I remember at the time how we struggled a lot that year, and I was just happy to be able to score the goals that kept us up.
Any from that season that particularly stand out?
Yeah, the Boston game, when I scored at Boston away, were an unbelievable feeling. It secured us safety. It was like an incredible day, to be honest. It was a real important goal, not just for myself, but for the club.
At that time, they had some half decent players in that side, and actually it was a tough place to go. We didn't have the best record there, but it was a really good win.
Yeah, it was brilliant. I remember Steve Evans was manager, and he were a nightmare to play against. After the game, we were all celebrating, walking back in the tunnel, banging on the doors. He come out absolutely fuming, trying to throw his weight about, but it was class.
So you then signed a new deal in 2007. So that was before your contract had actually run out. You got your deal extended, and then but you were attracting interest from Championship clubs. Did any of that get fed back to you?
Yeah, definitely. At the time, my agent was obviously being contacted by clubs. I think we travelled down to Barnet at one point, and I got pulled out of the squad. Chris Casper, manager at the time, and Ipswich had put a bid in for me. And at the time, they basically said to me, "We can't risk playing you. The deal might go through. It might be too big for the club to turn down." And I got pulled out of the squad.
Would you have fancied a move down to Portman Road?
At the time, I wasn't even thinking about a move or anything. It was just concentrating on scoring goals. The club had come to me and said that they didn't accept it. They were thinking about it, accepted it. And I think what happened was they asked for more money and the deal fell through. So it never come to fruition anyway. So I'd missed a game, could have scored an extra couple of goals and were fuming.
2009, 2010 seasons weren't the best because you picked up a couple of injuries. You had a couple of surgeries. How much did that affect your career?
Massively. I had to change the way I played completely. I've never been the quickest, but it took that yard of pace off. I had to become more of a sort of target man type player and adapt my game completely. It was such a frustrating time. And it could have been a different story if the diagnosis I'd got in the first place were correct. I could have been out for 3 months instead of sort of in total over the different surgeries and everything. It was sort of an 18-month period.
Yeah, it was a long time. But despite all of that, your contract was extended to the end of the 13-14 season. You worked your way back into the team and you managed to still be up there amongst the leading goal scorers. When you came back from the injury, how much did you think that had actually affected your game? I know you said you became more of a target man rather than a striker that kind of played off the shoulder or the fox in the box. How much did you have to change your game?
I think it were different times though. I sort of changed my game being more of a target man and being in the box, but at that point then we had sort of really good footballers who created better opportunities. I mean, we had the likes of Sweens, Steve Schumacher, and people like that who were putting balls in the box, and I could score. I think when I did come back, I scored 7 in 7 games in League One, and that's when my contract got extended.
So when you were coming towards the end of your time at Bury, you had another spell out injured, and then you went on loan to Wrexham. How did that move?
I asked for it in the end. Playing under Peter Shirtcliffe, we'd had a few conversations. We didn't particularly get on, and I just wanted to play games again. I asked for the move for myself to try and get myself back to fitness. And I think I'd only been out 2 or 3 weeks, and obviously Shirty left the club and Kevin Blackwell come in, and I got recalled straight away. Did
you find playing under Kevin Blackwell
interesting?
You need to elaborate on that, Andy.
It definitely went about the team. It was definitely all about himself. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, he's not backwards at coming forwards, is he? In his own interest, is he, Kevin?
Not at all. To be honest, I don't did too bad under him. I did play. I scored a few goals under him, but it's a nightmare. He wanted everything his way. Premier League and Championship clubs expected the same things in Bury, and it just weren't possible. For me, the way he treated players were not great, and I think that showed on him and get new players in all the time because the way he treated them, no one really sort of played for him.
So you eventually made the permanent move to Wrexham in July 2013. And I think it's fair to say it upset quite a lot of the Bury fans that you were allowed to leave. What kind of relationship did you think you had with the Bury fans?
Unbelievable. The whole reason I was still at the club at that point was because of the fans, because I moved to the area. I love the club. I didn't want to leave. I was sort of forced out of the club. So it was really disappointing. Throughout my time at the club, I felt that I'd turned down moves to stay at the club, which would have probably sorted me out financially sort of for the rest of my life. And I'd committed, wanted to stay. And then sort of that period were horrendous. At one point I were being told I couldn't train. I'd never play for the club again. I wasn't allowed to train with the team. It wasn't a great time at all.
So when you eventually moved to Wrexham, you had a spell there, and then you ended up being player manager at Southport via Halifax. Is that right?
Yeah.
How did the move to Southport as player manager come about?
I'd signed for the club as a player. Within 3 months, I think Paul Carden had left. We then had Dino Marmaria come in, I think he only lasted sort of 2 months. And when he left, there was me and Gary Jones, who were the senior members of staff, and we'd been asked after the team. I absolutely loved it and did well, and realised that's what I wanted to do. And the chairman had faith in me to give me the role on a permanent basis.
How did you find that you actually took to management, being the person that was responsible for everything?
Yeah, I loved it. Absolutely loved it. It was. I was proud of how we finished that season. I think we finished the season sort of. I think that it was the highest they'd finished in about 8 or 10 years, and absolutely loved it. Managed to use contacts and bring players in on loan, and obviously the next season it didn't work out as well with the budget and being able to bring players in and do what I wanted to do. It was sort of tough, but I wouldn't change it at all. I absolutely loved it.
The last time we actually met up sort of face to face was when I came down to Sussex Street to see you as assistant manager at Glossop North End. How did that come about?
I got asked. They just rang me up and asked me to go down. I got asked to go down and take training when the manager had left. Enjoyed it and sort of got talked into staying and helping out. And it went from there. It's a completely different game at that level, though. It's a lot different, but I enjoyed that as well.
So, as you said earlier on, you're still playing on a Saturday for a side in Bolton, which is a level below Bury AFC. Have you managed to get down to see Bury AFC yet?
No,
haven't seen you down there.
No, I've had an absolute nightmare. The first game of the season, we're away on holiday. When I come back, I had to quarantine for 2 weeks, so I couldn't come to games then. And then it went into lockdown again, so I've not managed a game yet. As soon as I can, as soon as it's possible, I'll be there.
There's a pint with your name on it, mate.
Perfect.
We'll just go back to your time at Bury. Out of all of the time that you spent there, 236 games, 69 goals. What were the standout moments for you?
I'd say there were a few. I mean, scoring at Norwich home and away in the FA Cup, what dreams are made of. I still look back at pictures from that day. I think when I scored at Carrow Road, there's a picture of me celebrating with Dion Dublin in the background with his hands on his head. Great memories. I think scoring at Ellen Road against Leeds in the cup as well was a big goal. But also, sort of, I'd say the first game of the season at MK Dons when I'd been injured and come back and scored 2. Come on at half time, scored 2. There's some great times.
Yeah, that was the first game at Neuven Stadium MK, and you spoilt the party that day, wasn't it? Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah,
because I think the winner was so 88th, 89th minute or something like that. It was really late on. It was a terrific result, and I remember because we'd done commentary on it, and as we were coming out of the press area, we saw Pete Winkleman, who was the owner at MK, and he had a face like thunder because Bury had come along. He'd spent all this money. Bury had come along and completely ruined his party, and it was all down to you. It was all your fault.
They'd spent all that money, and we had a forward with one leg who trained for one day the day before the game and played in 4 or 5 months. I couldn't walk for a week after.
So, out of all this, the 69 goals that you scored, give me your top 3.
I'd say probably Leeds at Ellen Road. Then I'd say I think I scored a chip against Notts County at home.
I was going to mention that.
I remember quite well.
It was almost. It was in front. It was in front of the away dugout, and the keeper had cleared it, and it was that far out and that far wide, and you chipped him beautifully, and it just dropped over the top of the keeper, who was backpedaling like hell. And I was going to say,
yeah,
that's got to be in your top 3.
Yeah, and I think probably the Boston goal, because it at that time it meant that much. I mean, that team at the time had worked so hard that season, and there was so much stuff going on in the background. That was a proper team. That were a load of lads who'd do anything for each other, give everything on the pitch. We weren't the best team. We weren't the players, but at that time it was just immense.
I certainly remember the game well. We, like I said before, we didn't have the best record, over at York Street. But that was a tremendous win on the way back. One of the other things that fans might not actually realise is that you were the last Bury player to score a hat-trick in the FA Cup for Bury. Can you remember the game?
I remember. Yeah, remember the game. It was the first ever game my firstborn come to. She were only probably about 8 weeks old. I remember it like yesterday. I don't know how I scored 3 because I think the keeper threw in the first one, but the other 2 were all right.
But if for people who weren't around at the time, it was against Workington, and it was a 4-1. Yeah. Paul Scott put us 1-0 up, and then they equalised. And your hat-trick actually came in 10 minutes, 80, 85 and 90, which is, I think it's little things like that that kind of stick in my mind, because we weren't a side that was renowned for having people that scored hat tricks, because we went at one point we went something like 10 years between Ian Lawson scoring a hat trick, and I think it was Andy Tutt scored one. We did have a lad who was on loan. I'm going to have to look that up. It was against Portsmouth. It was a 4-all draw, and he scored a hat trick, and his name escapes, but he was on loan. So he was a Bury player, but he wasn't a Bury player, if you see what I mean. And then I think the last one that we had was Andy Tutt against Colchester. That was the last. But yours was definitely the last hat trick in the FA Cup, and probably will be for quite some time. So the other thing that we want to mention that maybe the Bury fans don't realise was you actually represented England 4 times at C level, which is semi-pro level. So how did that come to pass?
Just when to be fair, that England C setup is unreal. It's basically run like the proper England setup. Their own scouts will go around watching all the conference players and take the best conference players. We actually played Italy in Italy, spent the week in Italy. I think we played Belgium in Belgium. I think I played against Holland. It was a great setup. It was really good.
I mean, personally, I'm not an England fan, but did you score?
Yep. Scored against Italy in Italy. No, I scored against Italy at home, and I scored against Belgium away.
Fantastic.
Yeah, the Italy team as well wasn't a semi-professional team. I think it was like the Italy under 21s.
Fantastic. Must have been some occasion, and of course, you actually get a proper England cap for those, and I suppose they must be like the sort of proudest moments in football.
Yeah, my mum's still got them up in her house now in little display cabinets. I actually had to. This is one of the things that you won't know. When I signed for Bury, I'd been put in the England C squad to play in the Bahamas, and because I signed for Bury, Chris Casper put a block on it and wouldn't let me go. I was absolutely devastated. Yeah, holiday in the Bahamas for 4 or 5 days, and he told me I couldn't play.
Oh dear. We're really grateful that you've taken some time out to chat with us this evening. Have you got a message for the Bury AFC fans?
Yeah, just keep the faith, keep going. I think what they've done in such a short amount of time is incredible. It's on the pitch, they need to keep doing that. I think they've got an absolute goal scorer in Tom Greaves now as well, which can only help.
Yeah. You fancy coming down and signing for us, or you think you could?
You never know. I might be able to do 10 minutes.
I'll have a word with Chris Murray, because he's the man who signed to the cheques. Andy Bishop, thanks very much for joining us here on Bury AFC TV. Cheers, Andy.
Cheers, no worries.